Hello and welcome to another Monday session, number 22 for today for College Success Skills. I, as always, am your inimitable host, Mr. Fowler, coming to you on a mostly sunny Monday, November the 2nd. I'm happy that you're able to join with me today for this session as we talk about college success strategies with our authors Nist Oljelnik and Jody Patrick Holkuch. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right. I hope I am. Get it right at least one time this semester. But in any event, we've got a whole bevy of material to cover today. So let's go ahead and get started. You'll have to deal with just my dulcet tones. As I've explained many times, the video feed does seem to run a little bit more smoothly if there's no video piped through. So hopefully you can still hear my voice at this point as I'm sharing my PowerPoint screen with you. Okay. Okay. From beginning. Okay. I think I said okay about 4 times. Anyhow, for session 22 today, we're going to start, as we typically do, with a brief preview and short review of content previously covered, or at this point, covered last Wednesday during class. That means specifically we're going to look back and reflect on some of the content from chapter 14, study skills for mathematics and science. Then we have a short lecture today, about 25 additional minutes of your time spent with that content, using technology to learn. Chapter 15 of our text, College Success Strategies. That means we're going to look at some ways that you can use extant technology to enhance your learning abilities. A lot of this may be sort of, I don't know, fairly obvious at this point for the majority of you, but it's still a chapter in our text, the last such chapter that we're going to need to cover with these PowerPoint presentations. So hopefully it will be somewhat entertaining or interesting for your consideration. If nothing else, you can go back and revisit these PowerPoints or these lectures to harvest information in preparation for the quizzes that you'll be taking later this week. Then, of course, we'll wrap up with some reminders addressing the weekly discussion question and a reminder to complete quiz 5 for this week. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. Before we move on to using technology to learn, we're going to go back real quickly and revisit session 21. Remember that in session 21, did I share that? Session 14? Yeah, okay. Remember that in session 21, we went over some of the content. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on. Didn't know that this would create such chaos, having 2 PowerPoints up here at the same time. Okay, so strategies for science and mathematics. Like we had discussed earlier, study skills for science and mathematics require you to think about the specific and distinct task that's underway. So we sort of split this discussion into 2 parts. The first dealing with science-based courses. And we said for science-based courses, you'll probably encounter many new terms and definitions. And these terms and definitions tend to be used later to define other terms because concepts will build one upon another. And proven principles and theories typically connect and explain other higher level concepts. Most science courses are lecture heavy, so good notes are a must. When you read a math or science text, remember that they explain concepts in sequential points, right? So it's a good idea to test yourself as you read and create specific reading goals so that your focus will be not on chapter or section completion, but on understanding an overall concept or idea that's introduced. They also suggest specifically for science texts that you read them with an idea of what data supports a concept or theory, rather understanding what data support new concepts and theories that exist. Based on your previous or extant knowledge, you may also want to consider what other theories are related to these new ideas. Or how does a phenomenon that's being described work? Is there a process involved? Why or how does it occur, and what does it show us? When you annotate mathematics and science texts, try to match your annotations to course expectations, and specifically note ideas in your own words, because those are often the terms in which you'll be asked to describe or explain content in quizzes, tests, and exams. Pay special attention to charts and diagrams and ask questions if you don't understand them, because they may reappear or similar diagrams and charts may appear on a test that you do need to understand in order to answer quiz or test questions. Remember that most of the time with science-based lectures, your textbooks are going to be supplemental. They have some basic knowledge, but oftentimes your instructors will have newer, more up-to-date information that they will use, and then you refer back to the text when you're taking notes and creating diagrams. Make sure that you practice your scientific notation as well, because that will be part of the learning process as you get further into these same courses. If there are charts, graphs, or more specifically formulas and equations that are added to the text or the board in your classes, make sure that they're written down in your notes accurately and completely so that you have the best chance of answering questions correctly. Okay, from here on out, we moved into mathematics texts specifically. Again, they are typically written in a sequential fashion so that one concept builds along another, and the focus is on cumulative learning over the totality of the semester or about 16-week period. Try to make sure that when you are tasked with understanding a concept in a math course, that you understand an initial concept before you move on to studying another one. Again, math courses are mostly math-based, and that requires a lot of lecture, including the concept of working out problems in class along with your instructor and your fellow students. That's why it's important to preview text before the class, looking at concepts, formulas, and any new terminology to prepare yourself for that day's lecture. Then, after the class is over, as soon as you can, read the chapter to enhance your knowledge or perhaps address any questions that may come up. If you do fall behind or struggle with a subject, get help sooner as opposed to later in the semester, because as we've learned in other chapters, content in math and science courses tend to build one upon another in terms of the ideas. So if you fall behind early, you may be falling behind for the entire semester. And we don't want that for you. We want you to be successful. Okay, now on to chapter 15. Using technology to learn or to enhance your learning from College Success Skills. Again, this is chapter 15, so it should be a relatively quick chapter. this is sort of a culmination last bit of content that's been thrown into the book by Nistol Jelnik, excuse me, and Jody Patrick Holkuch. Some of this information seems a little bit irrelevant at this point or even dated. And the most valuable information, ironically, is probably the information that we would have read about regarding online learning and distance learning classes and coursework. But now that we're in the midst of that very scenario, a lot of this is probably material that we would take for granted. So keep that in mind as we move through the content for today. Again, the rest of the course from this point on may be relatively quick and smooth going. So what is technology? Well, technology refers to several different examples of material that are used to facilitate learning and to make the ease of learning more applicable to our daily lives. Specifically, when it comes to college, as you can see here in this picture of a standard student lecture hall over on the left-hand side of the screen, computers are quite a necessity in college today, and most businesses as well. You, as a group of student readers and learners, have probably been using computers for most of your life at this point. You know, you'll have, I'm probably talking to a majority of people who were born in 2002 or thereabouts, if you're about 18. So computers have been around almost your entire lives. As such, you should be very comfortable with them. But there is a tendency sometimes to think of computers as simply word processors or even toys, access to information vis-a-vis the internet, but it really can be a lot more. So in preparation for reading this chapter or studying the content from chapter 15, you may want to ask yourself some study questions. Specifically, how can technology be used in college courses? What are the benefits and drawbacks to online learning? And how can technology be used in reading and studying? We're going to find out. Let's talk about technology as it's used in college classes. If you haven't had a chance to do this yet, you'll probably encounter a course in the immediate future where you have to prepare a class presentation or collaborate on the development of a single class presentation with a group of other students. Beyond some of the more obvious examples for class presentations, speech classes are particularly well versed in asking students to pair up and prepare presentations. I'm not a very big presentation instructor, especially during the already complicated technical aspects of moving instruction online. I'm going to get back into class presentations, I think, for this class at some point. However, this being our first session as completely online, I think I might want to have a better plan or approach to how I facilitate that. But don't write them off for other classes. Beyond those suggestions or presentations that you might be involved in, there's also a great deal to be learned about computerized notes. Oftentimes, your instructors may post PowerPoints like this one or other full-blown written notes on the web or in their classes or on their personal websites. I know that sounds sort of odd in the all learning online era or desire to learn platform, but some instructors actually create links to their own personal websites, which I know sounds a little awkward, but I think that's just because there are things that sometimes they can't do as easily on desire to learn as they can on some of their own websites. And they may have other additional websites because they are teachers who utilize several or one platform that they ship out to several different colleges. So don't be too reticent to use a faculty website, but be cautious and be thoughtful about all the things that you encounter. And if something doesn't strike you right, well, it's okay to say something about that. Now, as far as computerized notes go, kind of got off on a tangent there. Like it says here, sometimes those notes or PowerPoints can be posted directly to the web, but the main focus of our authors is for computerized notes used by your professors as supplements. If possible, they even suggest printing them out to use as a parallel note structure where you look at the professor's notes and then write your reactions, thoughts, and ideas on a blank facing page to help you organize your own notes and content. There may also be additional modules and supplements prepared by textbook companies. They may be CDs. They may be videos or sample questions or problems if we're thinking about mathematics and science. So all of those kinds of supplemental materials might be available vis-a-vis various technological links in your college courses. Of course, there are also course management systems like the one you're watching this presentation on, Desire to Learn. That's Kishwaukee College's preferred platform. Other examples that I've run across would be Canvas, which is utilized at Rock Valley, and Blackboard, which is utilized through NIU. I think that Canvas might now have replaced Blackboard. I'm not entirely sure. I've also worked with a platform called eCollege, which you may encounter at some point in time. They're all pretty much the same, though. And course management systems are typically used to house things like various readings outside of your typical text. They may even include links to ebook versions of your texts. But there are exams, a place to host group presentation and post group presentations. If you do have a group presentation that's assigned for a class, the authors of their text suggest that you meet early with your group after it has been formed or assigned, and that you meet frequently to make sure things are ready and the technology is up to date and everything is ready to go, more than you may initially think is necessary in advance for your presentation. You'll also find that a lot of these course management systems are host to discussion groups or listserv forums, much like the weekly discussion questions that we host through Desire to Learn. Shocking, I know. Okay, after this point, the text breaks down into a discussion of online courses, attempting to answer those two discussion questions. What are some of the benefits and drawbacks of the online learning system? And I think your practical experience this semester, and perhaps even a little bit last semester too for some of you, will more than prepare you for answering these questions. Nevertheless, I've tried to arrange them into a PowerPoint presentation that is relatively painless. Now, obviously, distance learning or online courses serve a greater population who may not be able to traditionally attend courses on campus. That could mean that there is a scheduling limitation, a physical or learning limitation. But, you know, the best things about online learning, I think, are the convenience and the pace. If you're a self-paced student who does well and has worked independently for most of your time in high school, or who has worked at an accelerated pace, an online course, even after, COVID, may be a really good option for you. There are certainly also various drawbacks to certain classes being offered online. Obviously, any course that features a dedicated lab component is difficult, or I should say more difficult, to facilitate in a completely online form. I don't know how long these conditions are going to last, but if we, just for the sake of argument, assume that these current conditions under COVID-19 lasted for another year, I think that I believe these measures are already in place, but if they're not, I believe that you would have courses that include a distinct laboratory component to be facilitated in small groups on campus 2 days a week, and that the rest of the week would be brought to you vis-a-vis desire to learn or some sort of computer interface. Literature classes, philosophy classes, even some basic mathematics classes are probably all really good candidates for online courses. I would also include speech in that, but I have encountered an immense amount of resistance from communication instructors and speech instructors in particular. There seems to be a fundamental and deep-rooted belief about presentations being necessary in a face-to-face capacity, or being a best accomplished vis-a-vis a face-to-face interaction, which is so odd because if you look at YouTube, if you look at our current news system, so much of that content is delivered online or delivered in some kind of communication. There are too many occasions, even right now in business, that have to occur face-to-face. So I think that there's just a little resistance there. But that's my 2 cents, just a feeling I have. Now, when it comes to online courses, you may be surprised to hear that there are 3 types of online courses. Specifically, there are synchronous and asynchronous versions of courses. Now, again, asynchronous, or courses just like this one, are the most common, which simply means that classes do not meet at a particular time or day. And the pace of learning is very dependent upon each individual student. The asking of questions, taking of tests, and submission of assignments occur all online. Now, one of the big benefits of an asynchronous class is that it's a lot more flexible in terms of due dates and submission times. As it says here on your left-hand side, students engage in course activities at any time, contributing at their own pace. Now, asynchronous classes are in direct opposition, or direct parallel, I think would be a better way to explain it, to synchronous classes. So synchronous classes sound exactly like what you would expect. Students engage in course activities at a specific time and date, requiring that everyone be online to participate in a scheduled event. So for synchronous courses, again, they're very traditional. It's basically like having a course that you would experience in a standard on-campus class, and more interaction is one of the most attractive elements to a synchronous class. Now, it's true that you meet with your instructor and that you connect to other students, but you're still behind a computer screen for a majority of this interaction. So until we come up with a, I don't know, 3-dimensional or virtual study or space akin to something in Ready Player One, you get the same sort of interaction behind a synchronous screen that you do for an asynchronous screen. I think you do get to connect to an author or to an instructor more intimately, I suppose. But in my experience, unless they've been doing online learning for quite a few years, I did online learning for 2 years before COVID started. You're really just getting a version of what you would receive in person. And not every instructor that you encounter in the collegiate space is a great in-person instructor to begin with. So if you then put that average to, regular or typical experience over a computer screen, I'm not sure that it really comes across any differently. The most important thing to remember with synchronous versus asynchronous classes is that exams and assignments are still asynchronous. So even if you have a synchronous course, you're completing assignments, completing exams without the benefit of the instructor there. So from my 2 cents, I feel like synchronous classes are a little bit more to my liking personally. I'm a very independent learner. I can usually sort through things without too many questions or concerns. However, I understand that that's not to everybody's liking. So that's why we have the option here at Kish, including courses for next semester. And as a quick side note, registration is now open. So if you are going to be joining us for the spring semester, go ahead and make sure you're making those connections to your registrar and selecting the courses that you may want to take for the spring semester. You may even encourage a friend to try out some courses here at Kishwaukee. We offer both synchronous and asynchronous courses. So there's probably going to be a class that will fit your needs, no matter what your preferences are. Now, the last or third form of teaching is the one that I actually feel is best. And that's because a couple of supplemental classes punctuated throughout the semester where you can come in and ask an instructor some face-to-face questions about an assignment or get specific questions answered or details explained is always a good option to exercise. And I used to actually work as a on-campus coordinator for distance learning, so that if a student had a question or concern about an assignment for a class, they could come in and actually talk to me face-to-face. Even though I wasn't necessarily their instructor, I could interpret the assignment and work with them in order to help them understand what their instructor's needs actually were. So for a hybrid course, you're presented with more than one format. You meet face-to-face for a specific amount of time throughout the duration of the course, and you complete a lot of work online. Most of the time, hybrid courses are very flexible because, like I said, there's a dedicated person, either your exact instructor or someone who can help you facilitate the completion of that work on campus or face-to-face. And actually, hybrid courses were on the rise before COVID-19 forced everything to be exclusively online. As we begin to recover from COVID-19, I think it's going to be interesting to see what will happen with hybrid courses. Will they continue to rise in popularity because now people have had so much forced exposure to online learning? Or will people be so sick of learning vis-a-vis a computer screen that they don't want anything to do with a hybrid course? It really depends on a number of factors, but no matter what the results will be, I am particularly interested in seeing how this goes. Now, when it comes to using technology specifically to study, there are a lot of various applications that a student can draw upon to enhance that process. Specifically, when you use technology to study, it's very easy, or easier, I should say, to organize one's notes. You could develop PowerPoints like the one you're watching right now. You could also enhance those same notes by creating maps and charts more accurately that you may not have been able to create in your standard notes. You can also host virtual study groups that can meet at times which are more convenient for a larger spectrum of students. Specifically, research has suggested that virtual study groups actually tend to be more on task than a standard study group because they're not distracted by any of the outside periphery which occur in a standard setting. Remember that when we talked about best ways to enhance study and form study groups, we talked about, or we discussed, the nature of making sure that you had a consistent place, that you created study groups that were comprised of classmates versus friends, that everybody contributed to the process or had something to explain. Various individuals were responsible from one session to the next of controlling the emphasis and focus of that group. Because you can eliminate a lot of outside distractions with a virtual study group, we theorize, myself and your authors, Nistel Jelnick and Jody Holkuch, that this is a reason why virtual study groups tend to be more effective than some of their in-person variations. Of course, it goes without saying that research is much easier with the advent of technology. The old days of going to a library and pouring through the stacks, using the card catalog to look up books and find their locations, citing content after it had been used, and preparing for your works cited or resources pages, all of that is rendered much more easy thanks to technology. I've often told students in my writing courses that the additional 2 hours that it used to take me to write a paper would have saved me so much sleep during my undergrad year that I probably would have gained back like 2 years of my youth. No kidding. Like, I would start writing a paper before it was due, usually around 8 o'clock. So I gave myself enough time. And I finished the paper by about 10. So if you're in bed by 10, 10:30 as a college student, you're doing just fine. You're getting more than enough sleep most of the time. Or you're approaching adequate sleep, especially when you're in your 20s or early or late teens. However, it took an additional 2 hours to properly format and structure your sources and citations. So I was usually pushing that 10:30, 10 o'clock time into 12, 12:30, just to put the polish that was necessary on the paper into effect. So that's a big help when it comes to organizing and developing your research. The only downside of using technology for your research is that you have to pay much more attention to the quality and variety of source material that you use. You have to focus on trusted, logical sources. And that's one of the nice things about being a student here at Kishwaukee College, because you have excellent sources, EBSCOhost, Opposing Viewpoints, and some other related linkages that are all offered through the Kishwaukee College Library. So this is a wonderful little opportunity for students to be invested in. It's also very tempting to plagiarize or take credit for work that is not your own, but this is to be avoided at all costs. Number one, you really cheat yourself out of your educational experience. I realize that high school probably presented a lot of us with tasks that we really weren't that interested in and didn't care too much about. But at college, you're paying for this, right? If you hadn't learned how to format a source or look up quality content to support an idea for a paper before, you should do so in college, even if it's painful. Many college students feel the same way because, after all, they justify the fact that they're spending the time away from their family. They're spending the extra money, in some cases several thousands of dollars, to learn how to learn or to understand the process of how to learn. And so if you cheat by simply exchanging your ideas or passing the ideas off of another off as your own, or paying for someone to write a paper for you, or so on and so forth, you're really cheating yourself out of the learning prospect and the promise that it holds for you. You should also avoid unintentional plagiarism, which is just a technical error or a mistake in your formatting, so that your grades don't suffer and you don't fail a test. Plagiarizing a major paper and then getting a 0 on that can substantially impact your overall negative grade, your grade in a negative way, rather. And some colleges take it so seriously that they even expel students for plagiarism. So you have to be very careful about that and avoid it at all costs. Now, another deficit of online learning is that you have to read a lot of content on a computer. So when it comes to computer reading, as you research your notes, oftentimes statistics have proven that research notes and their composition are slower and usually less accurate. Now, one of the benefits of reading on a computer is that you have a whole host of information. The entire, magnitude, if you will, of the internet and all of its search parameters are available to you in a much more immediate and comforting way. You can actually also trace down links on your computer for extended information. And pursuing extended information is a way to find a lot of interesting content to support your key research ideas. But be wary of the links, because you can often get twisted and lost following those links, those various hyperlinks, off into cyberspace, if you will. And it's sometimes difficult to readjust your focus to your original research question or concern. Another key benefit is that when you have a computer, all of this content is available anywhere you can find a good Wi-Fi connection, and at any time that you need to research and access this information. There are no limits on time or bookstore hours or anything like that. And even right now, during COVID, our library is actually not open physically. Even if you were on campus, you wouldn't have access to the library unless you made an appointment. In fact, they're asking students to use their online linkages and online services. If you need a book, they can provide them for you. You just have to order your books that you'd like to check out, and then they can deliver them through contactless delivery on campus. Excuse me, I have to get a quick drink here. Now, obviously, there are a lot of benefits to a more traditional version of reading. Specifically, when you read, typically, research suggests students read quicker and they read more accurately. Beyond these two really fundamental improvements on reading a traditional text, it's better for your health, specifically your posture and your eyes, to read a standard imprint text. And as a recommendation for those of you who may want to keep your eye health in mind, studies suggest that you should limit reading on a computer to 2 hours at a time. Beyond that, you're risking a little bit of damage to your eyes. To ease the process of reading online, though, when you have to read something, it's a supplement that's only offered online, the authors suggest that you invest in a very good monitor and check the settings to make sure they're set for the optimal experience. And even if you do that, perfecting your skills at reading online still requires quite a bit of practice. Now, when it comes to note-taking, there are a couple of real good suggestions here. When and if we return to class in person, and you're taking notes vis-a-vis computer or online, the authors suggest that you turn off the Wi-Fi connection in class to increase your attention span. It's so seductive, I think, when you have a computer screen even in certain courses sitting there in front of you, and if you just get bored with the lecture, hop on Facebook, check out and see what you're doing. A lot of people believe they can multitask, but I'm telling you, research has shown as humans that we don't multitask that well. If you ever want to test your true multitasking capabilities, there's a simple test that you can use. It just requires a piece of paper and a pencil. And what you have to do is write down the alphabet as fast as you can in a minute. You might not make it all the way through the alphabet in a minute. That doesn't matter. It's fine. Then test how far you got in that minute. Then test yourself a second time, this time writing a number by each letter. Again, test yourself for only a minute. You should probably come up with the same or roughly equivalent experiences. Now, if you turn that piece of paper over and I ask you to use the same minute of time coordinating the numbers and the letters that you write down, so 1A, 2B, so on and so forth. After a minute, even though you're only being asked to duplicate something that you had done just a few moments ago, 2 different tasks, you will be surprised at how fewer combinations you're able to generate once you are assigned to do 2 different things, even if it's write down a letter and its corresponding number. So if something that basic limits your capabilities, there's a good suggestion that a much more higher functioning task, like paying attention to a lecture and taking good notes while checking out Facebook or playing a lazy video game, is probably not a good likelihood. Now, by contrast, there are a few benefits. When you do get used to taking notes online, it's much easier later to reorganize them and to share them with your friends. They make for great study guides, and you can also, again, use professors' notes that appear online to create a parallel note-taking system, which was discussed at length in Chapter 10. So if you want to go back and investigate this concept of parallel note-taking, or if that sounds interesting to you, Chapter 10 is where that would take you back to. So, online learning, is it for you? On one hand, you can complete your coursework anywhere at any time. But there's less face-to-face contact with your instructor and other students. And sometimes there's no contact with other students at all. You're going to flourish in online learning if you have a greater sense of independence. However, if you're not self-motivated and don't have wonderful time management skills, you may need to learn that in order to excel at online learning or you just may be frustrated. There's greater degree of access available for online learning, meaning the time and schedule, as well as the physical location under which you are studying. But if you're working remotely, you may have tech problems that can't be easily answered. If you have work or other family obligations that restrict your schedule, it's a little bit better to invest in some time and energy into online learning, because that may be a better way for you to extend your educational capabilities or opportunities. However, working online can be very distracting because you do have the internet right there, just available at a quick click of a button as you work through other more interesting content. Perhaps not as valuable as the material that you learn in your college course, but maybe just more interesting for that day or on that particular occasion. You can also set your own pace when you're learning online. Whereas if you don't flourish online, it's very difficult sometimes to get a response from one of your instructors. And that's less immediate than a lot of students wish it could be. Okay, now that's it for today's lecture. So that means quiz number 6 is coming up. We should have the entire week to complete this quiz, and it's relatively short, focused primarily on chapter 11, which was all about studying and preparation for or rehearsal. So quiz 6 for Friday, focused on rehearsal, will be a pretty short one, but you still have the full totality of the week to complete that and get that turned in. We also have some weekly response discussion questions to answer. So don't forget to take care of your weekly discussion questions. Now, tomorrow is not technically a meeting time for us, but you may be surprised. I don't know how your other instructors are going to handle this, but it is election day tomorrow, Tuesday, November 3rd. So supposedly we are not supposed to hold courses. If this was a traditional on-campus semester, we would not hold courses. There would be no college session held tomorrow. Maybe not everybody remembered that or feels that way since we're online mostly. I really can't predict what your other instructors are going to do. However, I probably won't be available tomorrow because I'll be voting and I've got some other things I need to take care of. So if you have extra time tomorrow, please use some of that time to go out and vote, no matter how you feel. Always vote your conscience. And it's your right, and it's also, I think, a privilege that we share in this country. So I hope you are able to take the best advantage of that. Okay, that's it from me. I will join you for another session on Wednesday. And until then, I'll thank you for your time and your attention. We're on to bigger and better things, a whole new world of ideas waiting for us Wednesday. I'll see you then. Take care.